Ahsoka is a hollow spectacle, and in an effort to illustrate this, I have completely reimagined and rewritten the dialogue between Ahsoka and Anakin from episode 5, hoping to recapture the original essence of Star Wars. If you're short on time, you can find chapters in the description, so you can go straight to that section. Otherwise, let's begin from what may initially seem like a slightly strange place, but will hopefully soon make sense. In the 19th century, German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche famously declared, "God is dead." Consequently, in the absence of a celestial moral compass, humanity is left adrift in a vast desert, tasked with forging its own values, or in desperation, seeking solace in the worship of false idols. Similarly, Ahsoka's journey parallels this existential quandary. Her moral foundations came from the Jedi Order and its associated code. Well, the Jedi didn't believe Ahsoka when she was framed for the crimes of another during the Clone Wars, so she turned her back on them. And we hear Ahsoka declare,
"I am no Jedi."
Ahsoka's other god was her master Anakin, but Anakin would prove to be a rather tricky god to kill. Ahsoka knew that accepting he became Darth Vader would mean shattering her conception of him as her admirable master. It would also leave her to question within herself whether or not she has inherited his legacy of darkness. As such, the animated series depicts Ahsoka struggling to accept the truth of her fallen master. Out of the abyss left by the death of God, the philosophy of existentialism prevailed as a solution, which emphasizes individual freedom, choice, and responsibility. And so it is said, the journey of the existentialist starts from a place of nihilism, characterized by a belief that life lacks inherent meaning or value, however, leads to a place of life affirmation, characterized by the courage to embrace the awe and wonder of the world and find one's own meaning. It's an idea that when your moral code is thrown out, the very earth beneath your feet is no longer available, and you fall into chaos, something of immense value will be found. Out of that chaos arises a need to be new. Out of that chaos, a star is born. At least, that's the idea anyway. Similar to what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. For Ahsoka, her life-negative attitude is displayed in her crossed arms, uttering out expressions through a monotonous sigh, showing indifference even in dangerous situations like when a droid is about to blow up. She's aloof and generally mildly reluctant to even exist at all, seemingly only doing so out of a sense of duty to defeat Thrawn and make amends for her current legacy she sees as one of being death and destruction. This changes when she pops into the world between worlds, meets Anakin, and emerges as life affirmative, choosing to embrace the awe, wonder, and mystery of the world, shown by her being willing to take a leap of faith into the unknown by jumping into the mouth of a purrgil, despite not knowing where the journey would take her. Such a thing isn't taught in the Jedi school, but it is her way. She also seems happier in general, jokes with Hu Yang, and has a newfound sense of faith. I'd say this in and of itself is a perfectly fine growth arc, but its execution is both hollow and contrived, occurring as if by magic. Now, I believe it's a reasonable thing to analyze Ahsoka through a philosophical and religious lens for two reasons. One, of course, is that George Lucas created Star Wars to be a religious mythology, taking inspiration from religion, philosophy, folklore, and mythology. A Jedi wasn't just a generic superhero, armed with a glowy stick and some cool powers. Ahsoka tells us as much.
Being a Jedi isn't about wielding a lightsaber.
Secondly, writer of the show Dave Filoni declared that Ahsoka was a religious experience. With such a statement, you would expect a show with mature themes, one that is emotionally engaging, thought-provoking, and perhaps even dares to create introspective experiences in the audience, making us question our own beliefs. And given Ahsoka's tragic backstory, this approach makes sense. Unfortunately, though, this is absolutely not the case at all. As it would seem, Filoni only declared the show to be a religious experience in a very surface level sense, as Ahsoka undergoes this Christ-like process of death and resurrection. And it's equally rather surface level things with regards to the folklore aspect. The name Morgan Elsbeth is derived from a combination of Morgan le Fay from the Arthurian legend and Elsbeth Rioche, an alleged Scottish witch from the 1600s. Balon's skull and Shin Hati take their names from two wolves from Norse mythology. Skull chases the sun and Hati chases the moon, and once they succeed in devouring the sun and moon, Ragnarok will begin. Balon's skull parallels this by chasing some elusive, powerful source which could spell disaster. Once you scratch past the surface, however, you'll find this show to be devoid of substance. In fact, Filoni seemingly even makes an effort to actively circumvent themes that would actually necessitate substance, as we will see. This lack of substance becomes glaringly evident when we attempt to understand the enigma beneath Ahsoka's cold, statuesque exterior. Is she this way because she's supposed to represent a stoic, light side ideal? She is, after all, undertaking the role of master by training Sabine. This implies Ahsoka has a thing or two to teach her, or is Ahsoka's stoicism just some kind of tough exterior to hide her inner turmoil? Perhaps she wants to be cold and distant to prevent attachments forming. Attachment being something she's particularly cautious of given what happened to Anakin. This is something we, the audience, are largely left uninformed about. It's typical for stoic characters to maintain a strong exterior around other characters, but we, the audience, should receive the privilege of seeing the crack in that stoic face and gaining a deeper insight into what's going on beneath the hood. In the case of Ahsoka, however, we scarcely get that, and it's not until episode 3 in which she starts to open up more to Sabine. There's even implied that Ahsoka will undergo any transformation at all. Ahsoka has the stoic quality of being calm, she's rational, albeit daring, and she doesn't reveal her weaknesses easily, but we the audience should get that special insight. And because we remain so distant from her, we're unable to sympathize with her struggles. This portrayal is a far cry from Ashley Eckstein's expressive Ahsoka from the animated series, whose voice emanated compassion.
Ezra, Kanan gave his life so that you could live.
So, what's changed since then? Is it just a case of, well, Ahsoka, you're 48 years old now, time to be stoic, so just turn the emotions down a notch? This isn't good enough. We should be told why she is the way she is, and shown how Ahsoka has earned her stoicism. If you want to make a stoic character compelling, they should be shown to possess some philosophical wisdom, which can in turn serve as practical guidance for both other characters and us, the audience. Listening to them speak can be a rare treat, and when they do, you hang on their every word. Comparatively, Ahsoka has a key distinction. There's a constant effort to imply she possesses wisdom, but we never actually hear it. For example, Ahsoka says to Sabine, "You must open your mind. Learning to wield the Force takes a deeper commitment." When Sabine seeks clarification on this, Ahsoka evades, stating,
That's something you'll have to discover.
well, isn't Ahsoka supposed to be the master? Isn't it her job to tell Sabine how she can be more open-minded and find a deeper commitment? So here there's an implication that Ahsoka is wise, but in this instance, she's given an excuse to withhold any actual wisdom. Another instance occurs in a conversation between Ahsoka and Hu Yang following Sabine's refusal to destroy the map. In this scene, Ahsoka tells Hu Yang that had she had more time with Sabine, she could have helped Sabine make the right decision. Again, exact same thing. It's implied that Ahsoka has the wisdom to guide Sabine, but it's not shown. This is a bad look for Ahsoka because it makes it look like she's coming up with excuses. Sabine and Ahsoka also have a history together, and Sabine's issue of attachment seems to be her main struggle. So just how much time does Ahsoka need? Another instance, episode 7, in a standoff with Shin Hati. Ahsoka offers her hand to Shin and says, "I can help you." Shin, however, runs off. Again, there is some implication here that Ahsoka can help Shin, likely help Shin from succumbing to the dark side. But Shin, however, conveniently runs off, and we are none the wiser as to how exactly Ahsoka would go about saving her. And at the end of the final episode, Ahsoka says,
Ezra is where he needs to be. And so are we.
Again, implying some profound wisdom and insight in Ahsoka. Now, I don't find this one to be the worst offender. You can just look at this as Ahsoka saying, "The Force has led us here, trust in the Force." And I'd say it's excusable for the Force to have an element of ambiguity and mystery, but you can't get away with this elusive approach all the time. At some point, you want to hear some kind of actual practical wisdom, but this is something we never get, as all attempts at wisdom in this show are shrouded in thick ambiguity. So there's a constant implication that Ahsoka has some kind of wisdom, as is implied by the fact that she was a Jedi and in her stoicism, but there's always a convenient excuse as to why she can't reveal this wisdom to us. Not enough time, other characters must learn for themselves, other characters refusing her help. And to see this cunning way of implying substance but never delivering is to see what makes this show so empty. Now, in the rare instance that Ahsoka attempts to offer some kind of practical advice, it's the most cliched play-it-safe option, such as when she tells Huyang she doesn't want Sabine to be a Jedi, she wants her to be herself. Ahsoka vocalizes her disapproval of the Jedi, but the specifics of her critique are unknown. All we get is, Jedi bad, I want to train Sabine to be herself. Nothing is elaborated on. We don't know what it is Ahsoka doesn't like about the Jedi, nor do we have some kind of alternative revised code of ethics. We don't know who or what Ahsoka is, we only know that she is not a Jedi. When Ahsoka's advice isn't the most play-it-safe cliched option, it's kept as vague as possible. In quotes such as, being a Jedi isn't about wielding a lightsaber. Train your mind, train your body, trust in the Force. The irony is, in modern Star Wars, wielding a lightsaber really is all it means to be a Jedi. What does she mean by train your body? Are we talking about lifting weights? Learning some yoga postures? Going for a light jog? Perhaps a heavy jog? What constitutes training of the mind? Doing the crossword in the newspaper? Learning another language? Memorizing long sequences of numbers? Perhaps it means to repeatedly bash your head against a hard surface to physically shock your mind. Is that it, Ahsoka? Is that how one trains the mind? Ahsoka's deceptive guise of wisdom feels so fraudulent you're half expecting Force Ghost Yoda to pop out of nowhere and tell her, stupid you are. Stop pretending to be wise, you must. And this lack of inherent wisdom is reflected by the fact that Sabine, who is her student, doesn't show any sign of growth. Sabine's entire story revolves around wanting to save Ezra, no matter the cost, even when it could mean dooming the many by facilitating Thrawn's return. She never deviates from her course and learns nothing. When Sabine does reunite with Ezra, she hides the truth from him, and when he does find out, Sabine and Ezra don't discuss the matter.
Let's not talk about that. Not right now.
Again, avoiding meaningful dialogue. We never see Sabine train her body or mind, aside from one training sequence with Ahsoka. And despite not learning, not growing, she is rewarded with Force abilities. Powerful Force abilities at that. They are just given to her because she finds herself in a moment of crisis. Force users, thought to be nigh extinct in a galaxy of billions, possibly trillions of people. And when they are gifted, it often takes years of training and discipline from childhood before they can do what Sabine did. So anyway, based on what we've seen here, we can summarize Filoni's approach to writing dialogue as follows. Have the characters talk about some matters pertaining to specific events in the story. We need to find this object. We need to solve this puzzle. We need to go to this location. We need to stop this bad guy. But when the dialogue starts to teeter on the edge of places that will require some substance, some nuanced consideration, a need to actually step into the shoes of the characters and really understand their thoughts, feelings, and emotions, well, that's time to end the scene, so off we shuffle into the next sequence. But let's just dangle some shiny object in the face of the audience in the hopes that they don't think too much about what's just happened. Filoni may think he's found a great approach to writing with this tactic. It is, of course, easy and convenient, but it comes with the consequence of us, the audience, being unable to sympathize with the characters, identify with their struggles, and rendering the watching experience utterly unfulfilling. If you, the writer, make no effort to delve into the mind of the characters you created, then how on earth can you expect us, the audience, to understand them or care about them in any way? But now we enter the world between worlds, where this approach to sidestepping meaningful dialogue rears its ugly head the most. This is the first time we get to hear Anakin speak following his death. This is the first real opportunity for Ahsoka to engage in actual dialogue with Anakin following his fall to Darth Vader. and these two characters share a tumultuous past together. But despite this rich history to draw upon, trying to extract any meaning from the sequence is like trying to extract blood from a stone. And once again, the guise of ambiguity is implored so the audience can project their own philosophies onto it, rather than commit to any kind of practical lesson. Anyway, let's attempt to wring out what little substance this sequence has to offer. So Anakin confronts Ahsoka with an ultimatum.
Live or die.
And in Ahsoka's choosing to pick up her saber and fight, she realizes within herself that she does want to live, and in doing so overcomes her inner depression and becomes more open. But again, we don't see the substance behind this display, what changed in Ahsoka, what made her realize she wants to live. The second meaning that can be interpreted from this comes from Ahsoka choosing not to execute Anakin at the end of her duel. This is diametrically opposite to Anakin deciding to execute Count Dooku in the prequels. With this, Ahsoka is reassured she isn't destined to follow Anakin's dark legacy. So it's not a growth arc in the sense that Ahsoka overcomes some dark side quality within herself. She's just relieved that she was totally pure all along. Now, you could say a third meaning of this sequence is that Ahsoka needs to confront the truth that her master Anakin turned into Darth Vader, which is why Anakin presents himself as Darth Vader, with a red saber and red eyes. This is something she was in denial about during the animated series, so you could say this is symbolic of her accepting the truth in its entirety. But as we will see, this idea contradicts itself. Anakin tells Ahsoka within her is everything he is, and all the knowledge he possesses, of which he also inherited through several generations of masters. Again, nothing concrete to work with here, more broad statements that tell us nothing. What is this knowledge she inherited? All this talk of Jedi knowledge retained and passed down, but never a word of wisdom or knowledge uttered. This is also a silly thing to say because, well, if Anakin actually acquired all this knowledge from several generations of Jedi, perhaps he wouldn't have become Darth Vader. Socrates, for example, would say evil acts are the result of ignorance, lack of knowledge. Yoda, who's the wisest, could never become Darth Vader. You could say that Anakin became Darth Vader due to a lack of knowledge. More on this idea a little later. Anyway, in the prequels, Anakin is hardly depicted as someone who adhered to what he's told. His methods were unconventional. Also, Ahsoka inherited all the knowledge he possessed. Ahsoka didn't train under Anakin all that long, and they spent all their time fighting wars. If Anakin has all this knowledge from several generations of Jedi, how can he teach it to Ahsoka so quickly? I spent a little time on this line, but it's lines like this that expose just how little thought and care is being put into what's being said. The scene continues with Ahsoka saying her legacy is one of death and war. Yet we the audience don't know why she believes this about herself. Her feelings continue to be inaccessible, so we can't relate. Anakin tells Ahsoka she is more than that because he is more than that. Yep, more vague nonsense. More in what way? This hardly gives Ahsoka any reassurance given her concerns. Naturally, all this talk from Anakin about legacy and inheritance raises concerns in Ahsoka.
You are more Anakin, but more powerful and dangerous than anyone realized.
Is that what this is about?
If I am everything you are,
You've learned nothing.
And of all the bad scenes in this series, this one is the worst. So Ahsoka brings up the whole Darth Vader thing, but good, redeemed Master Anakin Skywalker refuses to address Ahsoka's concerns at all.
Let's not talk about that. Not right now.
And in fact, like a petulant child, gets offended that she would dare mention his past. So what? I tyrannized over the galaxy. So what? I slaughtered innocent children at the Jedi Temple. So what? I committed acts of genocide. So what? I tried to kill you. Get over it. Given the atrocities he committed, surely it's understandable Ahsoka would call the validity of her master into question. She may think, given his evil past, perhaps she should not heed his advice at all. Poor Ahsoka is clamoring for something here. Help her understand the fall to Darth Vader, and how the man in front of her has now been cleansed, redeemed, and worthy of being a master once again. But no, to hell with all your concerns, my Padawan. Live or die. To think this fool, Anakin Skywalker, has the gall to claim he's inherited all the knowledge from several generations of Jedi. He hasn't matured in the least. For Anakin to retort in this way suggests he's not willing to take responsibility for his dark past. It suggests both Ahsoka and even us, the audience, should awkwardly look the other way and forget about the gargantuan elephant in the room. The fact that he seems unwilling to admit to his past mistakes should be a red flag to her. If the Master refuses to address the sincere concerns of his Padawan, surely he is not worthy of being a Master. And this looks especially bad because although Ahsoka confronts the physical manifestation of Darth Vader, Anakin forbids her from actually discussing the matter, which makes the whole sequence a massive contradiction. If Anakin doesn't want to talk about Darth Vader, why does he switch Darth Vader mode on? But of course, the true reason the dialogue plays out like this is not because it actually makes any sense for Anakin to speak like this, not because it's befitting of his character arc, but because of Filoni's unrelenting insistence to avoid scenarios that would warrant a need for meaningful dialogue like the plague, no matter how much the characters and the story are utterly bellowing out for it. He absolutely refuses. But you just can't use this tactic here. It makes Anakin look disgraceful, every bit as immature as he ever was. So instead of this world between worlds scene having any meaning, which you would expect given the history between these characters, it's any lame excuse for them to pick up their lightsabers and have at it. This world between worlds sequence is thoroughly disappointing, but people are willing to overlook it because of its ambiguity. The pretty distractions, the fact that Anakin's live or die mantra magically fixes Ahsoka because this contrived story says so, and finally because the awful dialogue is being spoken from the mouth of a cherished legacy character making a great acting performance. And it's such a shame because Hayden Christensen is excellent in this episode. You can tell he's doing his best to pay respect to Star Wars and truly embody Anakin Skywalker. It's too bad such a precious character doesn't get to mature at all, despite what he's been through. His performance here puts into perspective one of the big problems with this show. Hayden Christensen is told to play the role of Anakin Skywalker. He understands his task. He knows Anakin Skywalker. The other cast members, however, will need a little more direction. The problem is, it seems like Filoni just doesn't make a real effort to understand his characters, which is strange given how long he's been with them. The other problem is that Filoni is inexperienced with live action, and in this series it shows. And you can imagine his guidance for, say, Rosario Dawson was something like, "You're Ahsoka Tano, you're a Jedi, you have trained your body, you have trained your mind, you've acquired knowledge, you have the Force." To which Dawson would have responded with something like, okay, thanks Dave. And it's likely this lack of direction that is at least in part the reason many of the characters look stilted and flat, particularly Ahsoka, Sabine and Hera. This isn't just in their personalities, but in their interactions with other characters. The entire first half of the show was leading up to the reunion of Sabine and Ezra. For Sabine, it was all she cared about, but when it finally happened, all we got was this. Ahsoka's reunion with Anakin has the same tone too, as Anakin casually says, "Hello, Snips," which is a curious way to greet someone given the last time they met he tried to kill her. As for the other significant reunion of Ezra and Hera, we didn't even see their embrace depicted on screen. Anyway, rather than descend into too much madness critiquing all the frustrating nonsense of this show, and in protest of yet another original character being trampled all over, I thought what better way to illustrate these criticisms than by actually rewriting the show. Now, to rewrite the entire show is a little too much, but given how underwhelming this version of Anakin is, I thought I could paint a different version of events in this world between worlds sequence, featuring a more responsible, matured depiction of him. Before we begin, this is a more dialogue-heavy version of events. Ahsoka is a TV show, not a movie. It should be advantaged by that, not impeded by it. There's time for dialogue, and this show doesn't know what to do with its runtime. In this version of events, you can imagine Ahsoka perhaps tries to maintain a cool, collected exterior, but she clearly carries some trauma from the past. She's struggling to hold it together, and we the audience have seen it. There has been some effort to make us sympathetic to her struggle. So, to set the scene, the tone for this version of events is completely different. Upon first seeing Anakin, Ahsoka immediately tenses up. She's uncertain what to make of him. She's heard the story of his redemption, but the last time they met, he tried to kill her. Ahsoka is petrified and unsettled as her trauma resurfaces and boils up. She's still confused about how Anakin became Darth Vader, and she just doesn't know what to make of the man in front of her. There is no warm welcome. Anakin doesn't casually address her as Snips, and Ahsoka does not address him as Master. Additionally, in this reimagined version, to add some stakes, Ahsoka cannot exit the world between worlds and return to the land of the living unless she successfully completes her growth arc here, and if successful, must then make the conscious decision to return. The door to return to the land of the living is also on a clock. Knowing time is of the essence and sensing the fears and concerns of his former Padawan, Anakin begins by immediately addressing the tension between them. Anyway, I hope you enjoy. So, Anakin begins. Ahsoka. The atrocities I committed are unimaginable. So terrible they go on echoing throughout the galaxy to this day. Families are torn apart, planets are destroyed, the Jedi are dead, and the remnants of the Empire linger as an ember, ready to set the galaxy ablaze at the slightest gust of wind. This devastation has left you battle-weary, Ahsoka. You've known no life other than that of the warrior, the life you were inducted into from a child to fulfill the agenda of war, and the life you continue to live now. In fact, you feel there will never come a day when you can finally put down your lightsabers and rest, because you spend your days trying to make amends for my debt. And you believe you have to answer for my crimes, because you think yourself guilty for what I became. Because of my legacy, Ahsoka, just to exist has become a burden to you. But not just a burden. You fear that as my Padawan, you have inherited my legacy of darkness. You wonder that your existence could be a danger to the galaxy, because like me, you are also powerful. Should the dark side grow within you, you too would be capable of committing great atrocities. You are blind to the darkness that infested me, so you worry that you are blind to any darkness that may have taken root within yourself too. There is fear in you, Ahsoka. Because of me, you don't know who you can trust anymore. You fear any kind of true companionship out of risk of forming attachments, so you close yourself off from the world to prevent attachments forming. Attachments may be one path to the dark side, Ahsoka, but fear of attachment is yet another. But that is not your only fear. You may have the courage to face down legions of stormtroopers and droids, but there is something you dare not face, and that is me. Though I may be dead now, I still exist stronger than ever as your shadow. You fear me more than anything. To repress this darkness will only make it grow stronger. Turn a blind eye to it will only create delusion in you, and that madness leads again to darkness. And now that the Jedi are dead, you've been left without the guidance on how to resolve this, and you've let fear fester within you. But fate has returned you to me. I can never repay the galaxy for the atrocities I have committed, Ahsoka, but if you'll accept me as your master once again, I will not let you succumb to fear like I did. I will dispel this darkness within you, but to do that, you must pick up your lightsabers again. Ahsoka manages to muster a simple response, okay, and draws her lightsabers. Anakin continues, the terror I committed has haunted you for too long, Ahsoka. It's time to face me, and face me for everything I am, and everything I have ever been. Only then can you be free of it. Are you ready? They pick up sabers and engage in combat. That ends part 1. So before we continue into the next scene, I'll just discuss some ideas behind this first part. In the eyes of some audiences, they may consider Anakin to be fully redeemed because he came good in the end, but I don't think it would be responsible for Anakin to see himself in this way. So in this depiction, he is repentant and takes accountability for what he did, addressing his dark past in full rather than evading it like a child. And we, the audience, aren't expected to awkwardly pretend the whole Darth Vader thing never really happened. This sequence also delves into more mature themes, but given Ahsoka's tragic past, it makes sense that things would pan out in this way. If you want the show to be all sunshine and roses, don't write tragic backstories. In this version, we get the spectacle, but an actual reason for the spectacle. What we repress persists, but in the presence of Anakin, Ahsoka has no choice but to address her shadow, which has distinct aspects such as fear of companionship, fear of herself, and failing to accept truths. Ahsoka isn't pure here, she has accumulated darkness. It's on Anakin to show that a Jedi is more than just a warrior, by using some Jedi wisdom to help save her, and merely announcing that he has knowledge isn't enough. Ahsoka's a bit of a mess here, she's just trying to keep it together. She falls into a trusting embrace of following Anakin's lead because she's a little too lost to navigate things for herself. Thankfully, Anakin can sense her concerns, he understands her, she needn't speak, she can just follow his guidance. Anyway, into scene 2. So, Ahsoka loses. Anakin continues. You lose. You lost because there is still darkness within you. Until you conquer this darkness, you will never leave this place. And as your master, it is my duty to set you free. You lost because you still couldn't see how it could happen that I, your master, who cared for you deeply and fought beside you to protect the people of this galaxy, became a Sith Lord. And how could you hope to defeat the darkness if you don't understand its workings? So let me tell you how it happened. Let me tell you how I, Anakin Skywalker, became Darth Vader. They told me I was the chosen one. I thought it was my destiny to wield power. I thought with power, I would bring order to the galaxy, and out of that order, there would be peace. The Jedi stood between me and my quest for power, so I saw them as enemies of peace. I thought I could hold on to everything I held dear, exactly as it was. I clung on to an idea of Padme and I together, and feared anything that would come between the idea, so I sought power enough to ensure I could protect it. I thought I could become so powerful I could control everything, save everyone, and be free of all doubt and worry that haunted me. This is the allure of the dark side, Ahsoka. It's just as Master Yoda would say, the dark side is seductive. I thought with the ultimate power, my desires would be fulfilled, and I would become so strong that I could destroy fear itself, because there would be no foe that could ever threaten me. So I sought power by acting out of fear, and I became more powerful, but the fear continued, and so continued my search for power. But the fear would not relent. I was tyrannized by fear, and it became maddening. I attained much power, but for what? It was all a lie. Not only could I not save those I loved, but I doomed them. But I had fallen so deeply into the darkness I could not see it. I was so obsessed fighting for an illusion of Padme and I together that I had forgotten to consider how she felt or who she was, so I lost my compassion. Eventually, I even forgot who I was and why I even sought power in the first place. My desire for certainty, for control, blinded me to the wisdom of the Force. It was this ignorance, this refusal to embrace the ever-changing flow of life that allowed darkness to consume me. It was only when facing down my own son that I finally came to this realization. Within him I saw a great fear. That fear was unlike any I had ever seen, except when I saw it in myself. But there was an undeniable distinction. Unlike me, he didn't act out of fear, but in spite of fear. He had courage, and not just the courage to face me, but the courage to look into the dark monster I had become, and yet still see something in me I thought to be long gone, but still remained as a distant glimmer. And that was the courageous Jedi I once was. It's only because he could see it within me that I could once again find it within myself, after years of being lost in an abyss. And so, in my dying moments, I finally broke free from the clutches of the Sith. Otherwise, I would have died, utterly lost. Not a human, but a mere vessel of the dark side. He saved me, Ahsoka. He saved the galaxy. So yes, Ahsoka, it is true. You are also like me. You are powerful. Powerful enough to alter the fate of the galaxy. And the responsibility that comes with that power weighs greatly upon you. When you first took command in the Clone Wars to lift the Separatist blockade on Ryloth, your risky tactics and lack of awareness caused you to walk into an enemy trap. Since then, you've never been able to shake the feeling of guilt that came with those losses. So you tried to eliminate the risk of spilling even a single drop of blood from our good men by attempting to fight every battle almost single-handedly. And when your lightsaber was stolen, you felt accountable for any blood shed as a consequence, even with it in the hands of another. But my transformation into Darth Vader encumbered you with more guilt than all, because you had since left the Jedi behind, and me along with them. But you were right to walk away from me, Ahsoka. The darkness had already infiltrated my mind. I could not be saved. Not until the end. You must accept that you did not have the power to change my fate, and be free of all this guilt that has plagued you all these years. Recall the lives you saved, the peace you brought to the galaxy. It's time to forgive yourself from the past. As Jedi, we do what we can to protect people, but we must accept that certain things are outside even our control. You care greatly for everyone and fear any casualty. The dark side will give you the promise that everyone can be saved. It will make you think that you can challenge the will of the Force itself. But this is a lie. You will trade your capacity for courage and compassion for domination and terror. You will try to control everything and deprive the people of their freedom. Tell me, Ahsoka, where would you have found your courage had you never known fear? You must let others find their bravery as you have found yours. So do not try to use your power to eliminate all your fears or the fears of others, but have the courage to face fear and inspire the same in those around you. Accept that there is chaos everywhere, and it will always be so. But this is good because it's how the Force finds balance. And in doing so, you will learn to be secure in insecurity and comfortable in vulnerability. And you will be able to remain tranquil no matter what danger you face. Just like Master Qui-Gon did, meditating peacefully moments before meeting his end to Darth Maul. Now forgive yourself, Ahsoka. Be free from the shackles of the past once and for all. Align yourself to the will of the Force here now, and face me again. So that concludes part 2. In the blink of an eye, Anakin Skywalker, once the courageous and compassionate master of Ahsoka, becomes Darth Vader. This transformation can be a struggle to reconcile for both Ahsoka and us, the audience. So here we get some insight into how this corruption spread within him. 2,500 years ago, Heraclitus said, "You can never step into the same river twice, and there is nothing permanent except change." But here Anakin explains how his downfall is caused by his refusal to accept change, or the impermanence of things, which is essentially an attempt to eradicate all chaos in his life. Anakin, being the powerful Jedi he was, and in a state of desperation, became susceptible to such an idea. In Taoism, a religion that influences Star Wars, the natural world operates in a cyclical manner, moving through phases of chaos and order. Change and transformation are seen as natural and essential processes of the Tao, so one should seek to align with its natural flow by embracing change and being adaptable, rather than resisting it. And this could be likened to aligning with the will of the Force. So you don't destroy chaos. Chaos is needed for balance. Light side embraces chaos because it is one aspect of the Force, whereas the dark side seeks to eliminate chaos altogether. It's the power-hungry ruler of the galaxy who's the antithesis to this. Rather than accept the natural change of things, he seeks to control everything. And if you control everything, you have nothing to fear. But then who needs courage when fear does not exist? It's only in that very fear that courage will be found. As the saying goes, all power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Literature in clinical psychology suggests that when individuals make an effort to expose themselves to their fears, they don't get less afraid. They don't become numb to their fears, but they become braver. Similarly, Stoicism aims to bring about apatheia, which means not to be disturbed by suffering or free from the effects of suffering, but rather to be in a state of equanimity, knowing how to navigate dangerous situations without harming one's soul or mind. This is Qui-Gon Jinn meditating even in the face of the utmost danger, contrasting Darth Maul, who is like a shark circling his prey. There's another great example of this in the Force Unleashed 2 video game, in which Starkiller is drawn by the Force to an ancient darkside cave on Dagobah. Just outside the cave is Yoda's residence because its strong darkside presence neutralizes Yoda's strong light side signature, preventing his detection from the Sith. So Yoda can just chill out there and act in accordance to the will of the Force by awaiting Luke's arrival. As Starkiller approaches the cave, he's overcome by fear, feeling the overwhelming dark side presence of the cave, but continues into the cave seeking answers. The dark side visions he experiences in the cave are so terrifying, he almost drowns in the darkness and emerges barely hanging on to his sanity. Upon realizing how Yoda can sit by the cave unfazed by all of this, Starkiller is both amazed and terrified, and concludes that surely Yoda must be absolutely insane, utterly corrupted by the dark side, and so Starkiller runs away in fear. But of course, Yoda is not insane. He may look a little crazy at times, but really, he's the wisest of them all. It's not that Yoda has become numb to the dark side presence either, but he can remain unaffected and unshaken by it. He's comfortable in discomfort. He does not try to destroy the discomfort. He can go for a leisurely stroll into the cave of evil, relax, and take a nap. So this is an inherent strength of the light side. Yoda can exist just fine by the dark side cave, but it would be wrong to depict a Sith Lord being able to exist in a place with a strong light side presence, as darkness cannot exist in the presence of light. Think zombies and vampires fear light. The same goes for orcs in the world of Tolkien also. Stoicism also emphasizes that we should focus on things within our control, because we will then be guided by rationality. However, if we focus on things not in our control, then we will move towards harmful living. Anakin had visions of Padme dying in childbirth, something he could not control, but of course would not accept. In failing to accept that, he became mad. Similarly, Ahsoka wants to save everyone. She is plagued by the guilt of her past. She describes her own legacy as being one of death and destruction in the show. And in trying to save everyone, it could unintentionally render her at risk of falling to the dark side, similar to the overbearing mother archetype, who suffocates their child with overprotection. This is also akin to the origin story of Buddha, who was a prince who had his life carefully curated by his father so he would never witness any suffering in the world, whether that be sickness, old age, death, etc. However, one day Buddha encountered an old man for the first time and upon doing so realized just how little he understood of the world, leading him to a quest for truth. So here Anakin tells Ahsoka, true compassion isn't building a fortress around someone, it's giving them the freedom to experience danger and live life outside of your control, which seemed a relevant lesson given Ahsoka's backstory. Equally, Ahsoka should forgive herself and free herself from the chains of her past. And this is part of what's interesting about Star Wars. It's not so much a clear-cut good and evil, it's that sometimes the path to hell can be paved with good intentions. Anyway, I did have plans for 1 or 2 more acts in this world between worlds sequence, but a few problems I should be honest about there. My channel is tiny, so finding the time to do all this can be quite tricky. It would have been preferable to publish this video around the time Ahsoka was airing so that this video would get a chance in the YouTube algorithm, but scheduling and the size of this undertaking meant that that did not happen. In fact, I've missed the mark by a laughably wide margin. With that said, if you like this kind of content and this becomes my second hit video and gets the channel to 1,000 subscribers, I'll finish this revised World Between Worlds dialogue, refine it, and release it into a full standalone video. So if you want to see that, you can help this video gain traction by liking, commenting, and subscribing. That, of course, will always be appreciated. But in any case, the purpose of this dialogue was to illustrate all that is missing from Anakin's character, Ahsoka's character, this series, and Star Wars in general. If you're going to bring Anakin back, write his dialogue with some respect for the legacy of Star Wars. For him to be portrayed as cagey and petulant is inexcusable, and another frustrating demonstration of Filoni's absolute refusal to write anything of any substance, even in places you'd most think to find it. And for Star Wars to be taken a bit more seriously, or have some appeal to non-fans, it should have some story underneath the surface that's archetypal, timeless, and can be appreciated by any. Anyway, this TV series is supposed to be about Ahsoka, but it's kind of split between Ahsoka and Sabine. This choice seems strange because given Ahsoka's rich history and traumatic past, you'd think there'd be enough material to write a compelling Ahsoka-centric story. But to do so would require a certain amount of creativity and inspiration, which is just too hard. So instead we shoehorn in some arc where Sabine gets to be a Force user too, so we can put her in cool lightsaber duels and it can be a fun time. It's falling back to the same tried and tested trope of master training Padawan we've seen plenty of times. We've had Qui-Gon Jinn training Obi-Wan, Obi-Wan training Anakin, Obi-Wan Luke, Luke and Yoda, Rey and Luke, Luke and Grogu, Mando and Grogu. The new sequel films will be about Rey training new Jedi apprentices, and now here we get Ahsoka and Sabine. So it seems Filoni wants to do the same old trope but with his own characters instead. But in this instance, the master-disciple story does not fit at all. For Ahsoka, she fears attachment because of Anakin. She refused to train Grogu because of his attachments to Mando. Sabine is clearly attached to Ezra, and her Mandalorian ways make her predisposed to falling to the dark side. Not only that, but Ahsoka tells us her legacy is one of death and war, and fears something of the dark side resides within herself too. She has her own affairs to resolve. So given all this, what are we doing taking on a new Padawan? It would surely make more sense for Ahsoka to deem Sabine not a viable candidate for Padawan, and to deem herself not worthy of being anyone's master. And as for Sabine, her character was already multidimensional. She was an expert mechanic and engineer, building super weapons as a teenager. She's well versed in the ways of both melee and blaster Mandalorian combat. She's a skilled fighter pilot and a talented artist. Now she's even achieved the unprecedented accomplishment of suddenly becoming a Force user at the age of 30, a powerful one at that. This feels especially undeserved given how stubborn Sabine is, never growing or developing throughout the story. Perhaps in Ahsoka Season 2 we may see Sabine get some cool Dathomir witch powers. Maybe spend an afternoon defeating Palpatine. Anyway, not only all that, but the increased reflexes and precognitive abilities that come with being a Force user mean they can achieve the remarkable feat of deflecting blaster shots with their saber. But prior to even tapping into her Force abilities, we see Sabine casually whacking away blaster shots with a saber, like Babe Ruth playing a Little League baseball game. She also managed to survive numerous encounters with Shin Hati without Force abilities. This poor Shin Hati, working so hard to kill Sabine, yet failing every time. A Force user can't even defeat a non-Force user in saber combat. This surely must take a serious toll on her confidence. I don't know about you, but in my book, if a non-Force user tries to take on a trained Force user in saber combat, I would expect the result to be that the non-Force user should be dead instantly, dispatched with ease. A fool for even thinking you can challenge them to a duel. I find anything else to be a bit of an insult to the intelligence of the viewer. For the non-Force user to even stand a chance, you'd expect they'd need to find some other way to gain an edge, whether it be their wits, tricks, or a large arsenal of weapons. Additionally, my idea of a lightsaber was that it was a deadly weapon, but only in the hands of an elite master, and thus evokes a sense of grandeur in the martial prowess of the Jedi and Sith. But if any idiot can handle one adeptly and even deflect blaster shots, then comparatively, the Jedi and Sith look very much unremarkable. The point is, this was simply not the story to be told. Seeing Sabine as a Force user should be a red flag that this writer has nothing to say, no story to tell. And all the flashy distractions serve as a means to cover up what a hollow spectacle this show is. It's just a case of, well, Ahsoka is 48 years old now, it's time for her to get her own Padawan. But train her for what? To be what? Just to be herself? So that one day Ahsoka can say to Sabine that within her is all the knowledge of several generations of great Jedi, and Sabine can feel very good about herself, but in actuality never grow at all because really it's just like the old idiom of the blind leading the blind. Additionally, Sabine has regressed to facilitate this story. You'd expect her to be matured by her dark past involving her being manipulated by the Empire and subsequently bring about many deaths of her people. However, later redeeming herself by fighting in the rebellion. But no, despite her backstory, her whole existence is one-dimensional, governed solely by her desire to see Ezra. But of course, it's easier to write an arc for Sabine if she regresses to an immature teenager, because it gives her more room for growth and can also conveniently facilitate the contrived story that is insisted on being told. It's easy to fall back to the tried and tested Master Padawan trope rather than write a natural story. Just like it's easy to destroy. Anyone can destroy. It's easy to write a traumatic backstory for Ahsoka, but what's hard is to create something new in the wake of that destruction. It's hard to rectify her agonizing past, because to reconcile her story in a cohesive way requires a certain expertise to identify and treat the troubles that have plagued her. It requires one to actually get into the shoes of the character, understand their thoughts, feelings, and emotions, and subsequently come up with an arc that can heal them. But rather than do this, Ahsoka is put through a cryptic process that miraculously fixes her instead. Ahsoka tells us being a Jedi is more than wielding a lightsaber, but this statement feels like such a projection. Because just what is a Jedi then? Is a Jedi someone with two droids, one of which is a bipedal, human-like droid, and the other is an astromech droid with a domed head, or as Malcolm Tucker would say,
a tinfoil pal in a pedal bin.
Is a Jedi someone who has a blue or green lightsaber, at least typically, and a Sith Lord someone with a red lightsaber? In modern Star Wars, we never get any meaningful idea of what a Jedi is, except that they are perhaps someone with a stoic demeanor. It's easy to give someone a lightsaber, but it's hard to make them worthy of the responsibility that comes with being a Jedi, or in the case of Ahsoka, someone that's supposed to represent a superior ideal. To have a surrounding philosophy associated with light side and dark side takes some thought. In this sense, the Force, the spiritual aspect, has become an inconvenience. We don't want to have Sabine earn her Force abilities because that would take some effort. We just want her to have them. The story plays out in this way because it's the easy option, the convenient option. But to further consider why such a course was taken, we can take a look at what's going on behind the scenes. Lucasfilm and Marvel are both owned by Disney, and Disney's stock is down 50% in the past 2 years. I don't know the full extent of what's going on at Disney, but when companies are failing, they typically become more risk-averse, especially when it comes to expensive productions like Ahsoka, a show which is supposed to be a promotional effort to sell movie tickets down the line. The two most notable strategies Disney regard as risk-averse are remaking old movies and superheroes, and it seems they're likely still as drunk as ever on the superhero craze, as Ahsoka represents an effort to superhero-ify Star Wars by insisting Sabine gets superpowers and doing away with the religious mythology aspect of Star Wars. The mysticism, the awe, the wonder, and the philosophical aspect seem to be more of a nuisance than an asset, because writing such a thing takes some understanding, consideration, and inspiration. Actual meaningful, thought-provoking messages aren't risk-averse either. The most risk-averse messages are either cliched ones such as be yourself, or play-it-safe ones such as suggesting that one should choose to live rather than give up and die, as shown in Anakin's live or die ultimatum. The other type of risk-averse message is the politically correct message everyone's heard countless times. If you've seen any Disney production of late, you'll find that they follow this playbook to the T. So this issue, and the fact that I'm doubtful Filoni has anything interesting to say, leaves the character Ahsoka as a hollow shell hiding behind a facade of stoicism, and the Force a shallow thing, merely a cool superpower that can be given to any character as needed. For Disney, creativity is seen as bad because it's not tried and tested. Good creativity to Disney would be something like giving a character new superpowers, such as having a Sith Lord shoot fire from their hands instead of lightning. Disney's approach actually represents the antithesis to the original story of Star Wars, which was a composition of fantasy and sci-fi as well as religious and philosophical concepts not too familiar in the Western world. The embodiment of wisdom was a decrepit green puppet that speaks in strange riddles, and that was fantastic. To do such a thing requires a bold creativity. Courage is the spirit of Star Wars, but now we get generic tropes and formulas instead. For example, the sequel trilogy was an attempt to remake the original trilogy, even defeating the same antagonist again. Ahsoka implores the tried and tested strategy of following a trail of mysterious breadcrumbs, training a new Padawan, and will eventually defeat the bad guy in the final showdown. Following repetitive formulas like this makes for an empty viewing experience, but at Disney, productions need to be churned out expeditiously to tight schedules to ensure Disney Plus users never cancel their subscriptions. And this could explain the lazy writing in this show, as Filoni was working on The Mandalorian Season 3, which also released this year. So although I'm thoroughly unimpressed by what Filoni has to offer us here, he created the character Ahsoka several years ago and has utterly failed here to humanize her or to make her relatable in any way, or give her a sense of an authentic journey. There is also the factor of to what degree corporate governance has been impeding the creative process. I'll continue to assess Star Wars productions on an individual basis, but based on what we've seen so far, it seems highly unlikely Filoni will pull a rabbit out of the hat in what's to follow. So, Ahsoka has failed in the religious mythology department, but in lieu of that, another aspect that makes Star Wars compelling is the war aspect of Star Wars. In which case, seeing the outmaneuvering, genius tactics, and foresight of a brilliant military strategist can make for a compelling reason to watch. This is where Grand Admiral Thrawn should come into play. Certainly, when his name is spoken, it seems to strike fear into the hearts of the inhabitants of the galaxy, and his cool and confident demeanor suggests he's worthy of such a reputation. But unfortunately, Thrawn is no Hannibal Barca, Julian, or Alexander, not even close. Instead, the most impressive thing about Thrawn is how he seemingly managed to con his way into the highest-ranking military position despite being so incompetent. A great military strategist should be able to overcome an opponent despite having fewer assets at their disposal. But Thrawn is the opposite. He has a more substantial arsenal compared to the trio of heroes he faces, and also only a simple goal of loading some cargo and leaving the planet. Despite this, however, he still manages to lose a large proportion of his military assets and fails to inflict any casualties on his opponents. You'd also think this military genius would be a disciplined drill master who put his men through rigorous training, but that is also not the case, because all men under his command are undisciplined and unskilled. Episode 7 sees about 30 of them encircle Sabine and Ezra in what should be a simple, point-blank, fish-in-a-barrel execution. But no, they can't do this simple task. Instead, they fire 1 or 2 stray shots into the air, after which time they patiently loiter around awaiting their allotted time to walk into melee range of our good heroes and die. Such curious behavior can also be observed in Episode 8. So for aspiring stormtroopers out there, here is the code of conduct that we can ascertain from this show. When you're facing a lightsaber-wielding foe, you may aim directly at them. If they turn their back, shoot into the air. In cases where you have them totally surrounded, stand idly by at ease and kindly allow them to regain some advantage. So Thrawn is underwhelming, to say the least, but subsequent productions will necessitate Thrawn inflicting some damage on the New Republic, who comparatively have far more resources at their disposal. This again would be an opportunity for Thrawn to impress us and show how even as an underdog he can prevail with his supreme intellect. However, Hera's entire arc has been a constant display of incompetence on the part of the New Republic, and it seems they've let Imperial remnants infiltrate their government. This is all indicative of the New Republic collapsing in on itself due to its own stupidity, rather than it being systematically picked apart by Thrawn's genius. And the reason for that is it's far easier to write incompetence than it is intelligence, just like it's harder to write meaningful dialogue. And it's for this reason that many characters in this show fail to live up to what they are implied to be. Thrawn is implied to be an elite strategist and supreme intellect, but is of course not. Ahsoka's stoicism implies she possesses some kind of wisdom, but instead she speaks in platitudes and ambiguities. She herself implies she could have helped Sabine and Shin, but never delivers. Ahsoka is also supposed to have an elite level of athleticism, but several of her scenes show her severely lacking in that regard. It's implied by Anakin that he and Ahsoka both have vast knowledge, but it's never shown. Sabine's negative disposition and being told she lacks ability by Huyang implies she would undergo a meaningful arc, but never does. And yet, despite this, gets rewarded with Force abilities, making her abilities feel unearned. The show is not just implied but stated to be a religious experience, but these are certainly not befitting words to describe a show that actively circumvents meaning and doesn't take a moment to consider the human experience, reducing characters to lifeless automatons. So, what to do when you can't write compelling characters and a compelling story? You take the easy road of dragging the audience from one mystery to another, implying that something significant will always be around the corner. There was the mystery of some Inquisitor that a lot of the fandom got excited about that just turned out to be an insignificant character. There was the mystery of some ancient map that led to a brand new galaxy. Well, all we got of that brand new galaxy was a desolate wasteland. In this new galaxy was the mystery of Ezra and Thrawn, whether they were alive and what they'd been up to. Well, it turns out all this time Ezra had just been hanging out a short walk down the road from Thrawn, and they've left each other to their own business. Ezra made some friends and Thrawn unloaded some cargo from the ship so he can put it back in episode 7. There was the mystery of what would be said between Ahsoka and Anakin in the world between worlds that was ultimately unfulfilling and just served as a contrived, vague means to give Ahsoka an arc. There was the mystery and anticipation leading up to the reunion of Ezra and Sabine. Well, that whole scene felt flat. And with Ezra and Hera reuniting, they didn't even bother to show their embrace, because all emotional intensity had to be siphoned out from every scene for some reason. Now there's this mysterious source of power Balon's skull is seeking, the mystery of what Thrawn will do upon his return, as well as the mystery of just why does Dave Filoni himself wear a cowboy hat. Mystery stands as not just one of the only reasons there's any interest in this show, but has also proven to be a successful marketing tool as it has brought about countless fan theories. Even I made one which actually still holds up, though the execution was not nearly as I would have hoped. I would liken this show to a business that puts all its effort into marketing the product, but invests minimally in product development, as the show constantly fails to live up to expectations you were hoping for. This started before the show first aired, with new trailers being dropped almost daily, and then continued from episode to episode as you're strung along from one mystery to the next. Then of course the show itself is supposed to be a big marketing effort to sell movie tickets down the line for the film that will wrap up the Thrawn story. However, the reality of this show falls far short from the promise, and in this way it betrays the trust of the viewer. Despite this, however, there has been a curious divide in the reactions to this show, as some of the Star Wars fanbase have responded favourably to Ahsoka. So why has there been some positive reaction to Ahsoka? Well, Rebels fans feel catered to. They get a chance to see their characters in live action. Some fans just want to immerse themselves in their favourite fictional world again and will appreciate any new details that are offered. Some fans are fixated on a desire to see the surface level things of Star Wars. And for Disney, that is the perfect fan. That's the fan that will say, droids, lightsabers, Anakin, Dave Filoni, George Lucas's chosen one himself. Yes, this must be the Star Wars I like. It's the fan that will see the vibrant glow and distinct hum of a lightsaber and fall into a hypnotic trance as it swishes and swooshes on screen. As a testament to a strategy that appeals to such fans, Force powers and the lightsaber are handed to Sabine like trinkets, sacrificing the integrity of her character and the story as a whole. And such a tactic represents how Star Wars has lost its dignity. The cheap shock value of Sabine's impaling marks another symptom of this problem. It's a sign of a franchise losing its depth for surface level appeal. It caters to the modern audience with a short attention span who's just not really thinking about what they're watching. I also sense a certain desperation around Ahsoka. The stories of the original characters, namely Anakin, Obi-Wan, Luke and Yoda, have finished, and Ahsoka, though not one of the original characters, has ties to them. This leaves Ahsoka as the sole torchbearer to carry something of their spirit, so you feel naturally inclined to root for her. Unfortunately though, she is a mere shell of a character who can't even carry her own essence, let alone the essence of the original characters, meaning that everything of the original Star Wars has dissolved. This is a bitter truth that the fandom would perhaps rather not come to terms with, but will still happily watch the show because at least on the surface it looks the same, and things with a shiny, familiar exterior can give the impression that the original spirit lies within. But funnily enough, the Star Wars of old is cautioning us against the Star Wars of new, because the lesson to be remembered is that attachment clouds judgment.